just like honey, sweet to taste on burning lips. Warm and live beneath the water, feeling icy fingertips. Soothing nectar to my body, wash the image from my eyes. Dirty streets of hungry people, drink the water, dry your eyes. First I look at the reflections, listen to the music made. Drinking water's ease the mind, thoughts of you begin to fade.
Check. 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Well, I should first ask, can you hear me? Yes? No? All right, good, Karen. Because I'm using my new AirPods, the second generation, which should be really, really helpful. Right, I think so. But as long as you can hear me, I'm really, really happy. So if you can't, make sure you tell me. Audio's good. All right. Yeah, this is the first time where I actually hear myself just from my own voice. This, it's not coming through here. So I'm real happy, and the music should be on light. First of all, good evening. It's Divided We Stand, everybody. It's 9/11. Oh, yeah. 9/11, Saturday night, the 29th of April. Quick note, Dave will be here. He will be here. He wanted to be here on time, but an old friend of his stopped by for dinner. Okay, I'll make it a little bit louder. Thank you, Kim. An old friend of his stopped by for dinner in Washington tonight, and his friend eats around 7:30, kind of a little bit later than, I guess, my state of tune. And Dave is very cordial, and very compromising. So Dave will be back at around 10. If he gets here earlier, he'll text me, but I should be able to get us through 1 hour. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us tonight. It's been wonderful having Dave back. I'm sure you appreciate that also. And it's wonderful having everybody here. If you're unfamiliar to Divided We Stand, this channel was created in response to the intransigence and unassailability of the Republican Party, realizing that there's no way we can negotiate with these people. And the only way to deal with this is to express yourself in whatever way you can to fight. Thus, Divided We Stand. Divided We Stand can be located on Facebook. It's called the Divided We Stand Facebook group page. We invite you to become a member. There are some group rules, but other than that, you'll have a great time being part of a community that commiserates and shares information. This channel, which is Divided We Stand on YouTube, is basically an arm of that Facebook group page, and we appreciate anybody who subscribes. If you find this interesting, please subscribe and share. This channel is not monetized. We don't want to be monetized. We don't ask for anything. The only thing we do ask for is that you subscribe. So we do appreciate that. So let's get to the chat room to see who's here tonight. We've got Joey. Joey, good to see you. Joey texted me around 3,000 times today. Karen, hope all is well. We've got Kim from the state of Washington. Good evening, Kim. We got, I don't know. We have a few more people, so I guess everybody is incognito, and that's fine with me too, because not everybody feels like interacting, and that's certainly okay too. I get that. So tonight, now Dave is going to talk about 3 or 4 topics he told me he's going to bring up, and that's fine. I'd like to say it was a busy week in news, but everything's been kind of busy the last year anyway, so I can't say it's any different than any other. We do know that Tucker Carlson is gone at Fox, and I'll have a few things to say about that in a bit. And we know that, of course, Joe Biden is going to be running again. We also know that Bernie Sanders is endorsing Joe Biden, and that is certainly because he sees the threat from the Republican Party, as you and I do. Which seems to be a very popular topic over the last 2 years. I mean, essentially, that's why we have this channel. So, in any case, I'd like to start off by going to the interwebs here. And let me find this. Okay. Now, I'm sure that you've all heard of Thomas Friedman. Thomas Friedman is an economist, but he's very, very popular. He is time to time on CNN, MSNBC, he writes in the New York Times. So he was interviewed recently, and I mean very recently, I believe it was earlier today, by Michael Smerconish, who originally is from Philadelphia. I think he still is from Philadelphia. So we're going to switch to the web. I want you to see this short piece. All right. Now, I'm going to have to look at my controls to make sure that you can hear what's going on in this video. So I'm going to have to be careful because, again, I'm not using my standard equipment, so to speak. Okay, this is short, so it should be relatively painless. All right. Let's just hope the audio is up. All right, I have it up fairly loudly here. Put it up a little louder just in case. If there's a problem, you'll tell me, I'm sure. So, yeah, you know what, Silly Wonka, you may be right. You may be right, Thomas Friedman, right. I wasn't confusing Milton Friedman. I know Milton Friedman was an economist. I didn't confuse that, but no, Thomas Friedman isn't an economist. I don't think he is. Yeah, he's a writer for the New York area. He's a writer. But for some reason, I thought he was an economist. No. But thank you for the correction. I fell off a cliff there. So that's why I need you guys. All right. Yeah. Okay, here we go.
Column in the New York Times, why Kamala Harris matters so much in 2024. Thomas Friedman joins me now. He is a 3-time Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times columnist. He's the author of 7.
Right. So my apologies. Thank you, Silly Wonka. Yes. New York Times columnist. I need to be corrected.
Best-selling books, including The World is Flat, and most recently, Thank You for Being Late. Tom, thank you for coming back. Context matters. You are very much for the re-election of President Joe Biden. In fact, that's what prompted you to write this piece in part.
Well, Michael, first of all, thanks for having me. Yes, the real point of my piece was that there are, in my view, we're at a critical juncture, and 3 things cannot happen. Israel cannot turn into Hungary, an authority.
Right. I think I would agree with that. Israel should not turn into a Hungary, although we'll see what happens. I think the people there in general are more rebellious about their right-wing leadership than the people in Hungary. We'll see what happens, but that is an issue. We don't want Israel to become authoritarian, but it could certainly happen. My bets are that it won't, but right now it's a problem.
Authoritarian democracy. Putin cannot win in Ukraine. Ukraine cannot go Putin. And Donald.
Yeah, and that's true. We can't let Russia win. Even if we have to make them tie, we can't let them win. And now the big one.
In Ukraine. Ukraine cannot go Putin. And Donald J. Trump must never, ever, 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 ever be back in the White House. So that is my priority. And that is my focus. And so what I'm asking is, what is the best Democratic ticket to win that election? And to me, the ticket you need is one that appeals to the very forces that enabled Democrats to do so well in the midterms, which were moderates, independents who looked at Trump, looked at his agenda, and particularly the election denialism, and voted against virtually every election denier in that election. This is going to be a close election if it's Trump versus Biden, and we need the center. We need the moderate and independents and white working class to come out for Biden in enough numbers that he can win. This is Code Red.
Right, and that's the title of
thousands of miles.
This show tonight, Code Red, because it's always been kind of Code Red to us. Let me go back to original scene. Right. So we've always kind of said this is Code Red in our own way. Now, I'm going to try something a little bit different, and let's just stick with that one video for a second. Because this kind of topic came up prior to the election in 2020, in that, could Bernie have defeated Trump? And of course, a lot of people on the left love Bernie. I mean, I voted for Bernie in the primaries. But being more pragmatic, I realized that, America being such a diverse country, which is generally conservative, I didn't think there would be enough on the left to overcome what they would lose going to the right. And as it turned out, I mean, we'll never really know the end of it. But the bottom line is, we're very, very lucky that we didn't get Trump and that Biden was the answer. Not a great answer, but if it's the only answer, that it is great in its own way. I mean, I think a lot of people really were not enamored with Joe Biden, but it was important that, of course, Trump won. So where I want to go with this is we see Thomas Friedman saying, we have to have this center movement toward Biden so that these people, whom he really calls the center right, these people who they're basically somewhat conservative, but they don't want to vote for Trump, and you've got to get them along. There's so many of those type of people. So my question to you is the Biden-Harris ticket the most effective ticket when it comes to winning? And I'm not trying to lead you on to anything. Do we need to make any changes there? Don't forget, we have Kamala Harris. We don't know really the relationship she has with Biden right now. She's been kind of quiet. Was she instrumental in getting the African American vote? No. Anyway, I do want you to respond, if you would. And just simply type in your thoughts or tell me what ticket you think will be the most effective ticket at defeating Donald Trump. Now, after we, work that out, hash things out, then we'll go into areas that relate to that, where we get into the Code Red. All right? So, okay, we're going to start here with Kim. My music seems to be a little too loud. Maybe it's just my earplugs. I don't know. All right. So Kim says, I really doubt I will be voting Dem this time. Now, I'm going to assume, Kim, that means you're not going to vote for Trump. I know that. And I guess what I'm going to ask you, Kim, is do you see, and that's certainly your right to vote for whomever you want. Do you see that or accept the danger in that type of voting given the situation? I'm not asking you to vote Democratic. That's not at all. But do you see, or at least let's just put it this way, because I don't want to put it in any way that demeans your choice in vote and how you think. Maybe let me rephrase that. Let me ask you, Kim, okay, let's say flat out, why do you think it'd be best not to vote Dem this time? What advantage do you think we would have, or you would have for doing that? And again, I'm not challenging your decision. I'm just trying to get an idea of what you're thinking. All right, so here we go. Thank you, Kim, for responding. First of all, Biden will die in office, and then we get Harris. Okay, let's suppose hypothetically that happens, because that's what some people are thinking. Now, of course, Biden would not be the first president to die in office. We do know that. We've had presidents who've been assassinated, presidents who've just died, for example, like Roosevelt, and a few others, of the assassinations like McKinley, Lincoln, and Kennedy, things like that. But you said that then we get Harris. Yeah. So I want to ask everybody, or you, Kim, too, but everybody, if you have a problem with Kamala Harris being president, what is it? I mean, is there a specific, policy that there's just no way you can deal with that, or she's not capable of being a president? I want to have, some idea of what you would think if Kamala Harris became president. Now, Trucker John mentions no one knows when Biden will die. He's a healthy person. He might live to be 100. That's true. That's true. I'm only just saying. Let's just suppose. Let's try to go into that, because it's a possibility. We're not saying it's going to happen. Now, to get something started, I'm just going to say this. I think there are some positives with Kamala Harris being president. Okay. Generally, it should electrify the African American voters in whatever way that happens. Okay. Another positive, she's an attorney. She's good at debating, as most attorneys should be. She is not a Republican. She's had some issues in the past with some people, but just those three things there. And I think Dave would agree with me. We may, run this by Dave. But again, she's not unintelligent. She's an intelligent woman. Okay. Energizes the African American vote. And she is young. I mean, relatively young. And she is a Democrat. Brian, she needs to reveal more of her policy philosophy. In other words, her philosophy. It's my understanding that generally there is a platform, like if you go to whitehouse.gov, there is a standing platform for what the Biden administration is for and against. Again, this is my opinion, that she would not alienate that policy. I mean, she was for, climate controls with the Paris Accords. I mean, I don't think she would see differently. I don't see how there'd be much difference between Biden and Harris, and I think she has enough understanding that she can't go too far off the rails, because she I think as an attorney, she kind of knows her audience. Okay, she would be in a really, really tight spot to just go rogue. So I think we can kind of anticipate her policies, and I wouldn't see any great change. And again, even if you didn't like any one specific policy, it would be streets ahead of any Republican policy. That's just my opinion. So I'll lay that out there and see what you think. That's interesting, John, because I've often thought that too. Of course, Trump is younger, and he's the kind of guy that you think he's going to live forever. But the reality is, the guy has a poor diet. He's extremely overweight, whereas Biden is not. He doesn't listen to his doctors, and if his doctor was that, Randy Jackson or whatever his name was, that may not be the kind of doctor you want anyway. A lot of women, this is Trev, a lot of women have a problem with a woman president still in 2023. Hillary might have won if she was a man. That is something, Trev, I don't know. I say it's about time we've had a female president. And as Trucker John said, Hillary did win the election in terms of the popular vote. And I think if you
I don't know what you mean by, I said it's about time we've had a female president, isn't it? Trucker John said,
I'm getting like my Siri going on here. That's not good. Right. Anyway, if you look at the total female voting population, not just the white female, I would think that Hillary would have won. Now, I don't know that would be the case for white females, because you have all these people in the Midwest and the South who are white, and it makes you wonder. But I would think that the females would go for a female candidate, if not more so, especially because of the abortion issue, because Kamala Harris would have an understanding of what it's like to be a female and wanting to have control over one's body. I think that's part of the problem when you look at things like the let me show you. You look at like the Ways and Means Committee. I'm trying to dig this up here. Because I want to show you something, because I wouldn't normally have gone to this, but I think it's kind of important to look at, because we're talking about females and would they vote for a female. I want you to look at what the Republicans have here. Now, the Ways and Means Committee is made up of Congress, men and women from both parties. And when there's the majority party, there are more people on the Ways and Means Committee than the minority party. So the Republicans control the Ways and Means Committee. And they're the ones that, they set the tax rates, the tax tables with the IRS and things like that. And this is where I think we have to see this male-dominated Republican Party. Oh my God, where are my scenes here? All right, here we go. Let's go back to the web. All right. Now, here you go with the Ways and Means Committee. Now, this is the Republican Party here. Okay, we go 3 rows in, and they're all male and white. Okay, we go 5 rows in, we have 3 females out of 20 members. So 17 are male and 3 are female. They're all white. Okay, now we have 3 more females, so that's 6 females and 19 males. Again, all white. Now we go to the minority party, the Democratic Party, and we see a different picture. And the faces you see seems more like a normal American neighborhood. The demographics play out well within the Ways and Means Committee on the Democratic side. Now, why do I bring this up? I don't really mean to discuss the Ways and Means Committee with all of you, but this is the danger. This is like the plot. What's it called? Whatever it was. But anyway, the problem is if you have a Republican-led leadership, it's going to be a very patriarchal type leadership. And this is why even somebody like Kamala Harris, to me, would, even though there are going to be people who don't like her because they're racist or because they don't like Democrats, I think in general, having a female would be something like a fresh breath of air. I mean, it's about time we have a female president, and it should have happened under Hillary, but the way things went, that's just what it was. So let's take a peek at some of the commentary. Okay, so Karen says to look more to stuff on her. Yeah, I think we have to do more searching. I mean, I remember her participating, on various hearings, and I found her to be a very competent questioner, very thoughtful. Now, of course, I'm sure she's getting some questions from her staff, but that's what you should be doing anyway. But she seems intelligent. It's not lacking there. I still don't know why so many people have a problem with her. I mean, there are a lot of problems with a lot of candidates. Didn't hear much of her in California. Was she? I guess she was the attorney general there, too, in addition to being senator. Yes, Joey, Hillary ran a terrible campaign. It was not unlike Al Gore. Yeah, I think what happens is I have Siri kind of locked in with these new AirPod 2s or whatever they are. So if I say something that relatively close to, I don't even want to say it because she'll start coming up. It starts coming up. True, she didn't visit the heartland, Middle America, flyover states. They are often called. Yeah. Yes, probably should have visited the heartland. Although we know how the heartland votes. Nice graphic. I don't know which graphic you were talking about. Katie Porter. Oh, she's another one. I don't really, at least from what I've seen, I didn't really see much difference between Katie Porter and Kamala Harris in how they question. They're both very methodical and pretty good at like the gotcha type questions. I know that Kamala Harris has the ability to she'll ask the question 3 times until you answer it. and she'll humiliate you if you don't. And that seems to be the same modus operandi of Katie Porter. Now, what Katie Porter will do is she will answer her own question. She'll say, if you're not going to answer this for me, I'm going to answer it. And she, of course, is prepared. She'll have posters and she'll show that. So in a certain sense, they're similar in the way that they approach a dialogue with the opposing party. And if anything, you're probably not going to believe what I'm going to say. I believe both Katie Porter and Kamala Harris are better than Joe Biden when it comes to exuding an image of somebody who's ready to battle. It seems to me with Joe Biden, he'll get angry behind the scenes. But when he's on camera, it seems like he has this faux anger. And again, this may just be me. But when it comes to Katie Porter and Kamala Harris, you have two trained attorneys. And whether it's faux or not, they don't hold back. Or at least they know when to put the dagger in. And when you're dealing with the likes of Ted Cruz and Kennedy down in Louisiana or Mississippi, we talked about him. He's a real winner. I think you need that because these guys like to play a word game, and often they won't look good to you or to me, but to the Fox viewers, they'll look good. I think you have to have an individual who can be decisive enough that even though the Fox viewers don't like the other side, they are smart enough to know when they've lost the game. You know, it's kind of like a football game. You don't like when your team loses, but you say, shit, you know, the Eagles lost and the coach needs to get this right or something like that. And that's kind of what you want, because the moment that you have someone like a Katie Porter or a Kamala Harris win, and I mean win, a discussion or a heated debate with an opponent, what you do want is in some way for that opponent to be humiliated, so much so that their own side will start attacking them, because nobody likes a loser. You see? So, in that sense, I think that either Katie Porter or Kamala Harris would be perfect. Now, I don't think you can just insert Katie Porter in lieu of Kamala Harris. It's just, she has earned the right, Kamala, to become president because she is the vice president. It's just the way it is. Now, had Joe Biden decided not to run, then we could argue, you know, would you have a Porter-Harris candidacy? You know, that's having two females. And I personally think that's fine too. Again, it's about time. We don't need to have, you know, a Ways and Means Committee higher up. And essentially that's what we do have. If you think about it in the Senate, the Republicans is it's almost all white. You have a few individuals, like say from South Carolina and places here or there, but in general, it just seems to be a bunch of very autocratic, I wouldn't even say conservative, autocratic, trumping Republicans. And as Thomas Friedman said, this is the point where we're at code red, which will bring me to my next point, if I can get to it. All right, let's go to the interwebs again, if I may. All right. And this came from the New York Times, Jamel Bowie. Okay. And he wrote an interesting article in the Times. And basically, I'm not going to read this entire article here, but it basically speaks about what you and we have been speaking about the last 2 years, and that is that the Republican Party understands the demographics of this country. They know where things are going. They know that the country is browning. They know that the liberals outnumber the conservatives. So, in addition to severe gerrymandering, we do in that both parties have gerrymandered, but the Republican parties have taken it to an extreme. You look at the Supreme Court, what's happened there. In fact, just recently, it was, I forget, Nadler had asked for John Roberts to address the ethics issue in the Supreme Court, and he refused. Used some excuse about the separation of powers and things like that. But in this article, he goes on to discuss, what's happening down in Tennessee, what's happening in Montana. So to sum up where we get to code red here, we're in a situation where they are willing to do anything. And now you have not just Trump doing this, but all of them. All of them are doing this. You and I know this. And this is why I can't vote for anything but Biden, because I see now what obviously has been happening in Hungary. You've seen what's happened in the state of Florida. It's become a crisis. The gerrymandering has given supermajorities in state legislatures and in the Congress. I've said this before. The state of North Carolina, the difference between Republicans and Democrats is 2 or 3%. But in terms of the representation, it's completely unequal. You're getting supermajorities. And this is the only way in their minds that they think they can win this thing. And if it wasn't for a few brave individuals on January 6th, they would have gotten away with it. Mike Pence would have been hung. And he's such a coward that he's willing to pat the backs of the people who are ready to hang him. And I don't know why it's so difficult for people to understand this and why it's so dangerous. This is just, it's unspeakable. It's almost like the Nazi Party. We've gone into this autocratic mode in certain states, leading to fascism. And I don't know how long it would take to go from autocracy to fascism, but it wouldn't take very long. The very fact that they're gerrymandering the way they are, the very fact that DeSantis is doing what he's doing in Florida, it's essentially a separate country. So we've got to deal with these people. And the question is, how far do we go with them? So I'm going to ask you that question. Given the fact that the Republicans are going to try to have minority rule in this country, what is the best way to counteract that? Let's go to the chat. Okay, so Gary, I think I know now what you're talking about. You were talking about the graphic between the Republican and the Democratic Party in the Ways and Means Committee. I'm going to have to disagree with you there. I'm not here to try to prove you wrong or anything like that. I just want to be clear. If this is what you're talking about, first of all, it's obvious there are more African Americans on the Ways and Means Committee from the Minority Party, which is the Democratic Party. Of course, there aren't as many members. There's 18 members for the Democratic Party, and part of that's because of gerrymandering. But here we go. We've got. I mean, if you're saying, well, there's a lot of white guys in there, well, I guess you can say that, but I still think there's a big difference here. Okay. You have 4 African Americans. We have at least 2 Asians. Females, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 out of 18. So that's a little bit more than a third, a little bit less than a third. Whereas this, I don't see much minority representation here. And I see 5 females out of 22. Yeah. So, and the crime of this is, the Ways and Means Committee. We're talking about our taxes. They decide the standard deductions. So, and I think John, although Gary says nice graphics, so thank you, Gary. I mean, he knows it makes a point. I guess it all depends on your state of tune, how you think about what the faces are. But I think we can all agree, aside from the Ways and Means Committee, that if you look at the voters, the Democratic side versus the Republican side, just look at January 6th, right? I mean, you look at the crowd, right? I mean, I didn't see many African Americans there. I might have seen 1 or 2 out of 8,000 people. It looked like the House Ways and Means Committee to me, right? Like the first 4 rows, that's kind of the way it looked. Excuse. And that's always a problem when you're not representative. That's not representative of a society. Even the fact that we have that many attorneys as politicians holding political office. I mean, if 70% of politicians are attorneys, then you would expect 70% of those people. I mean, that would be 70% of the jobs out there. We should have representation from everybody. So, I love Katie's graphics and attitude. My search on my part for it, to be fair. Yeah, I mean, Karen, if you do check out some of the hearings that Kamala Harris was on as senator, you'll see she was great. She didn't give up. She kept going at them, and you need that against these wise guys. Okay, especially people like Cruz. You need an attorney's mind a good attorney's mind to combat the kind of nonsense you're going to get, because they're just going to, twist words around left and right. Silly Wonka. Historically, fascists only understand force. Italy has constantly grappled with fascism. I'm glad you brought that up, because I don't usually like going there. It's better that somebody else did it, but I'm glad you did. I'll bring this down here a little bit. Now, in most countries, That seems to be the case with these kind of people. And sometimes you take drastic measures. Now, I know this is comparing apples and oranges, but if you looked at near the end of World War II, the United States, bombed the shit out of Germany, and we hit a lot of civilian targets. And it was obviously there to demoralize the German populace. You tell them, look, we have to do this and to have them understand. It was there to make the German people understand where we stood. Now, a lot of people died in the firebombings and all that, and this isn't a discussion about that tonight. But what is in discussion, what is in play, is the idea that sometimes people have to, or governments believe they have to do certain things in crises, and that was one of the cases. We have to bomb the shit out of them, and a lot of people are going to die. Now, again, I'm comparing apples and oranges, but putting a little bit of this out here because this is what Silly Wonka says, because historically he's right. He's right. They've only understood force. Now, on the other hand, you have people like Lindsey Graham. I was going to say Lindsey Wagner. Lindsey Graham, who just a woman came up to him yelling in an airport, and he backed down. So, while I think you're correct, Silly Wonka, absolutely correct, that fascists only understand force, in America, what has been effective is nonviolent protest. And this is what I need help from you folks, because I think there is a point when you have to do something, when somebody's so intransigent and the crisis is such that something has to be done, that maybe you have to take those kind of measures. On the other hand, in the United States, the only effective type of protest to get things done has been nonviolent protests. As soon as protests got violent, usually bad things happen. So how do we deal with these people? Well, number one, you have to vote them out. But again, if they're going code red, how are we going to deal with this? And I don't know. There's a part of me that gets angry and says, well, Joe, man, you may have to do what you got to do. And then there's the other side that says, look, we got to play this thing right. We've got to be the good guys. And, we got to be like Ukraine, Russia's bombing the apartment buildings, but we can't send missiles to St. Petersburg in Russia and in Moscow and start bombing apartment buildings. Although the Ukrainians, you would think, would have a right to do that. I mean, it's an eye for an eye. But you don't want to upset the populace in Russia so that they do actually have a cause. Because you're at this teetering moment where you can just make them just sick enough of this whole thing and realizing that they're not attacking us, that maybe eventually they say, hold it, we don't want our sons to keep dying here. And I understand the logic of that. And that's probably what the American military has been telling them. And so far, so good. They've laid off, despite these horrific attacks. Just like during the Iraq War, when the Scuds were, coming into Israel, there's this pleading to Israel, please don't fire back. We'll take care of it. Please don't. Because what would have happened if Israel would have fired back, then maybe the entire Middle East. It's crazy, right? So that's a good question. And there are rationalizations on both sides, and Silly Wonka brings up a good point. And I know, Silly, you weren't necessarily saying that that's the way we do it. I mean, you're just saying that historically that's what you had to do with these people. I don't know that we're at that point, but there could be a point at some time where that has to be done. We're not there yet. I think we have to look at what happens in the 24 elections, because here's what I'm thinking. Since it's not just the Trump administration now, it's the entire Republican Party has gone nuts. Now we have a greater problem because they'll all be in it. Not the total Republican populace, but the Trumpers, the MAGAs, yes. But if you have, the Ted Cruzes and the Jim Jordans out there, and it's 2024, and it looks like we've won the popular vote, and it looks like we've won the Electoral College, maybe this time they do play that game of, changing the electors in states like Georgia. The swing states. And then they pull it off. Then you do have the constitutional crisis. And then when you get to that crisis where the rubber meets the road, you have the Supreme Court. And in this case, we have a Supreme Court that is corrupt. And then it goes into, again, what Silly was saying about fascists. What's in the minds of the Gorsuches and Kavanaughs, Alito? How far do they go? And if they do go that far, they say, you know what? I can see a reason for those electors, even though it should be 9-0 and shouldn't happen. But I'm not surprised at anything, because they've gone all the way, folks. They've gone all the way. So who's to say 2 years from now they won't do it again? All right, let's get some comments here. Karen, I can't vote for Republicans. Most policies are cruel. January 6th and gerrymandering. That's it. That is divided we stand right there. I might add that I can't even have a discussion with most of them right now. It's funny because most of the Republicans I know, I can only have discussions outside of politics with them. And even when they do not speak about politics, I can smell their politics. So even though, we kind of live and work near each other, we're essentially separate. Which is okay with me, by the way. I mean, I'm okay with that, just as long as you don't start throwing flamethrowers in my yard and things like that. I don't have to be near a Republican. I don't have to have a united country in that sense. I can walk into the grocery store and get my groceries if they're there and they're doing the same. I just don't need that violent stuff. And essentially that's what America is about. It's not necessarily having to be friends with your neighbors. You can have your barbecue over there and I'll have my whatever here. I'm not at war with you, but we've got nothing in common. It's kind of like a divorced couple who have some type of amicable, resolution where they can, forget about hating each other. Okay, it's kind of like, the the squirrels are kind of over here, and the birds are over here, and the groundhogs over here. They're not friends, you know. They don't chill with each other, but they let each other do its thing. And I can deal with that. I don't have to have an America where everybody's, you know, at the same barbecue. Some people think it has to be that way, but as Dave has said in the past, and where is Dave, by the way? It should be 10 o'clock. He should be here soon. As Dave said, that America really never really existed. I mean, you just look at the churches, how segregated they were. Another story. Yeah. Just like Brian pointed out, feeling the same. Yeah. Max, good to see you, Max. I'm wondering who's going to run with RFK Jr. as vice president. Okay, RFK Jr. Oh, he's the one with the conspiracy theories. I get worried when Bill Maher starts defending certain candidates, and this is one that he defends. Ostensibly because of his position on COVID. Because Maher was so angry that he didn't have his audience during COVID for 2 years. He loves attention, Maher. So anyway, he's, make a long story short, he's defending Kennedy Jr. And maybe I have it wrong about Kennedy Jr., but he just seems like the type of guy where, you know, you listen to him for a while and he sounds okay, and then he says something really fucked up, and then it just ruins the whole mood. You know, I don't know. Who would run with him? Williamson? I don't know. I don't even think there's a chance for a viable third-party candidate. There's no viable Democrat aside from Biden right now. No. Gavin Newsom's too much of kind of like the playboy type. Oh, here we go. Here's Dave. Is Dave here? Dave, hold on. Let me get the both of us here. Guest is in the green room. Dave, hold on for a second. I'm a little bit off tonight. Both. Here we go. Switch scenes. Hold on a second. Oh boy. Hold on. I'll get you in here, Dave. And here we are about to go. Now we can. Welcome, right. Dave. And your friend Ralph there?
Yes, he's right behind me. Ralph,
wonderful.
Down.
Right. Ralph, welcome to Divided We Stand, Ralph.
Here I am, scooching.
And this is Ralph Danheiser. Do I have your name?
Scooch.
Ralph Danheiser. Yep.
Ralph Danheiser, welcome. I'm Brian Weinstein, and welcome to Divided We Stand.
Since I'm not wearing earphones, I don't know what you're saying, but
it's not important.
Even better.
Anything Brian says is never important.
Dave?
The reason I'm here, by the way, is since anybody can be anything or anybody they want it to be these days, I was going to be Dave Price, but then he showed up and knocked me out of the seat, so I'm going to go home.
Okay, let's see what Sully Wonka has for us.
We've been talking about, Dave, Kamala Harris, and some people have a problem. Kim mentioned that she doesn't want to vote Democratic because of Kamala. So I was mentioning that, you know, I asked her why, and we went into this kind of thing. So we were talking about Kamala Harris. You know, is there any alternative to what we have? And I'm basically saying I think it's probably a good thing that we have her because it does energize the African American vote, and she is tough.
Of course, this week, I mean, one of the news stories, not unexpected, President Biden wants to be President Biden again, right?
Correct.
Tuesday, he announces without a whole lot of fanfare, that he's going to run. Now, it is presumed, of course, it's presumed that his vice president would be Kamala. It doesn't mean that it has to be. There's a couple of things that could happen. Remember, the president doesn't choose the vice president. They also have to be nominated and win, right, at the convention. So
Correct.
I think, I wish it were different America. It's not. But here's the thing. Kamala Harris, whether you like her or loathe her, politically has two strikes against her. She's a female and she's an African American. All right. And you could argue that we have had.
Well, from the Republican Party, that's a problem.
I think it's also a problem for the Democratic Party.
Well, that's what kind of came up. They say that females don't like her, but I think that white females might have a problem with her.
Well, I think that's part of it. But the other thing is, why wouldn't a Democrat like her? I can think of a couple of reasons. One is, in fact, I've talked to a very staunch Democrat here. They just feel she's never been qualified for any position, that she was Willie Brown, who was Mr. California, right, at one point. She was his mistress. That's nothing, that's not, and he really put her in play, and she moved up that way. So there's some that resent that. They really don't think she's equipped to be that. A second thing is, some of the reputation that she got early on as a vice president out of her office was she wasn't really easy to work with, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then there are Democrats who just said, look, they believe that independents will vote against her because independents will think Biden won't make it. Now, gentlemen, I was just here a second ago. We had him over for dinner tonight. He's a former journalist, and he's turned 85 today. And he has some concerns. He said, I'm 85, Biden is 84. I know how I feel. I couldn't be president. He feels, with that intellect, the way it deteriorates. And Brian, you're whatever you are. I'm 71.
63.
Yeah, 71. I'm not decrepit, right? But there are certain things that I can't do that I'm sure at 81 I won't be able to do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The key, here's a no-brainer, kids. The key is you got to win. Now, let's look at possible ways that Joe Biden couldn't win the nomination. Hey, Karen. And Ralph says, hey, he's booking out. He turns into a pumpkin at 11, so he has to get back to Maryland by 11 o'clock. The idea of it is, okay, where could that happen? If there were enough people, and I don't think there will be, in the Democratic Party, and when I say party, I'm not talking about you and me and people who vote Democratic. I'm talking about the party movers and shakers. If they really felt that Joe Biden was unelectable compared to who he was running against, right, there could be a move at the convention to have him replaced. I don't think they would do that. Now, New Hampshire is the first primary, on the East Coast, and Robert Kennedy Jr., who we talked about last week.
We brought him up too, by the way. That
to me, he's a complete flake.
Well, that's what I was saying. He seems to be saying things.
Beyond that, he actually is a conspiracy theorist. Just absolutely insane stuff he says about autism and drugs and all this kind of stuff, and other
COVID.
theories about and 5G, picking our brains and all that. But he will run. So someone could emerge, but I just don't see it happening. So the reality of it is Joe Biden declared for a job that's his unless he is physically incapacitated or dies. That's my take. I think he would be hard pressed to name another vice presidential candidate other than Kamala, unless some kind of arrangement was made that she would step aside for someone, and I don't see that happening.
I think it would alienate the African American voters too.
Well, it would depend on how you sell it.
Not
yes,
that she's
absolutely.
really close with African Americans, but it would look bad.
Well, I think it's interesting. I noticed somebody had a comment up here about mass incarceration, and she has that label, like really, she was a prosecutor, really tough on crime. Well, I'm not a fan of what should I say, fascism, but sometimes you want your prosecutor to be really tough on crime, right? As long as it's fair and equitable. You don't want a white prosecutor only prosecuting black people for crimes or the reverse or whatever.
Right.
And, we don't know much about her. We knew a little bit more about her as a senator than we do about a vice president. I mentioned last week on the show, and I still think it's interesting. I think Biden as vice president to Obama had a much larger role than Kamala has with Biden. However, a lot of Biden's role was negotiating with Congress, right? Because he was
He had experience with it. He had many, many years of
exactly. And so now it really becomes, the other side of that question is who's going to run for the Republicans. Today, two-person race with Trump being in the lead and picking up a little bit every day. Now, will that last? We don't know. What I find just very interesting is the mention of Trump. He gets charged for the first time charged. He gets back in the news with the sexual suit, right? The civil suit of the rape. But just his name there keeps driving his numbers up. And what's interesting enough, he's made some inroads in Florida this week. He also has two of your favorite congressmen, Brian, supporting him. Lindsey Graham has already endorsed Trump.
Talked about him tonight.
And Josh Hawley.
Oh,
from
Hawley is just horrible.
Now, the thing that's interesting, I think, in all this is, Trump has kind of trash talked Mitch McConnell.
Mm-hmm.
Mitch McConnell has basically come out and said, I will endorse and support whomever the Republican Party endorses and supports. Now, certainly McConnell has power, you know what I mean? But basically he's saying, whoever it is, I will. And that's the way. Gavin Newsom, I think he's an up-and-comer. My one question about him is, how well known is he on the East Coast with people? Trucker John, I think I think he's what you look for, right? Dynamic.
Well, he has looks too. I know that sounds crazy, but it matters.
No. The old thing is they've talked about that if we had sound today, and they called him a monkey, so he looks for it. Abraham Lincoln would not have been president. It's a lot of it. It doesn't stop. Who gets to be president of your senior class? Somebody has to be popular, right?
Right.
Well, that carries through, throughout the political life. You have to be popular, and you have to be popular with. Hey, thanks, Judy. You have to be popular with the right group of people. But everybody has to keep in mind, all of us, we're in 2023, right? The election's not till 2024. That's an eternity in politics. I think it's especially an eternity given the fact of Biden's advancing age, and I think that will work against him. Whether someone would choose, at this point, I would vote for Joe Biden against any Republican that I've seen. But I'm not saying I wholeheartedly endorse him or anything, but I would just do that because I think he would do a better job than any Republican. What concerns me a little bit is you've got, let's say it is Trump, and let's say it is Biden. Just say it is for the sake of argument. At what point are young people want to get enthused with politics, right? They really don't. I don't think young people really want to vote for an 84-year-old guy. Now, what's your definition of young? Is your definition of young 18-year-old voters? Is your definition of young 25-year-old and under voters? Is your definition of young 40 and under?
But yet, many of the young people were willing to vote for Sanders.
Well, but Bernie.
I still think it has to do with your mentality too.
I think you're right, Brian, on that 100%. Bernie represented something that was much younger than his age, and so he appealed to that type of person, right? I was a Sanders supporter, but I always with the reservation. I didn't think he could win.
Right.
I liked what he said, but it's a cold hard rule in politics. You're nothing if you don't win. I mean, think about it. Really, you're nothing. Now, the question becomes, what are you willing to do? And what are those around you willing to do to have you win? We also have to keep in mind the world situation. Certainly, we know that foreign powers will get vested and invested in the election, right? So what will they do? Are we at a point where we're so vulnerable to hackers? We just don't know. It's not like the old days when deals were made in smoke-filled rooms, right? At least they're out in the open to a certain extent. And Judy, I'm kind of with you, which some people say it already is. He and Keith Richard, but I think one of the interesting questions, Brian, that we have to look at is, as a society, we are aging. We are aging. All right. The largest group, percentage-wise, not numbers-wise, but percentage-wise for growth, is Americans over the age of 100. Right. And of course, that drags along all the 84 and 80. You got to be 85 and 90 and 95 to get to be 100. And the numbers are there. Now, is there a point, Brian? And I'll ask you: is there a point when you're too old to do a job?
Well, I guess it all comes down to cognitive abilities. I mean, you're not playing in a hockey game.
Well, that's my point. Hockey, yes, right? I mean, what's the old? You follow hockey? I don't. It's a silly Canadian sport, but what's the oldest professional hockey player right now? Would you guess? How old is that?
I think he's 40 years old, right around 40, and that's usually somebody who's not really out there. Could be a goalie too. So anybody who's got to go this way, because hockey's a lot like basketball. It's just pattern after basketball.
Constant movement, right?
Constant.
So it's not that there's an age restriction, but there's a physical restriction on your ability to do the job, which you don't control. The coach, the general manager, you've got some exemplary people. George Blanda, way back when. But
do we? I think we can just throw out this idea about, well, we're going to discount somebody because they're going to be old enough to die. But because anybody can die, and we said people have died in office. Okay, there is a remedy for that.
And I agree, but I think this what I'm saying is this whole election is to be caught up a lot in ageism, simply because it is a valid question to ask. All right, yeah, Trev, but I'm worried about the aliens that visit her in her sleep. She also has some crazy stuff too. And Trucker, you're right. I don't think she is presidential material. Right now, the Democratic race consists of Joe Biden, Miss Williamson, and Robert Kennedy Jr. But see, then again, even the ageism question. If it's Trump versus Biden, that question kind of goes by the wayside because they're both old.
And that came up in the chat room too.
Right. So again, it's how you attack. Look, I'm trying to think of issues that could move America. Guns are not going to move America. We are stuck with guns for the foreseeable future, whatever foreseeable future means. Right? True, Judy. That's also very, very true. I think
dementia seems to be the one big problem.
Well, I know I'm gonna the gentleman I had with us tonight, Ralph, and he will admit it. His memory, I mean, he was good. He was a very talented writer, worked for a number of big organizations, including Reuters for years, also worked on the Hill for a number of years. And he said it's driving him crazy. He doesn't have dementia, but he just can't remember things. And he's 85. Now, his cognitive ability was pretty great. So his fall is more judged by him than others, right? Because he just, and we'll talk about things and he can't remember. Should it stop? I mean, the question on the floor is, should age stop someone from being a president? And the answer is yes, in this sense. You have to be a certain age, right? A 12-year-old can't be president.
Right.
So we have an age limit on the one side, right? Now, do we have an age limit on the other side? No. And I think so. This factor is just going to play out, and I'd love to tell you differently. Everybody's just going to have to make up their mind, which I just think you do anyway. There'll be two viable candidates running for president, and you're going to have to make a decision. I suppose you could say if Trump were run as independent, there'd be three, but who knows what he'll do. Do you think, Brian, as you sit there tonight, and anybody else, please chime in that's listening. Do you think, if you had to say tonight, is Donald Trump going to be the nominee? And yes, we can hedge because we don't know. But tonight, what do you think? With your crystal ball.
I don't even think it's that difficult. You just look at the pattern, look at the past, look what you're seeing on the media, and there is no doubt in my mind, unless he chokes on a Big Mac or a chicken nugget or something like that, he is going to be the nominee.
Nominee, okay. Ron DeSantis would argue with you, but
That's funny.
I wouldn't.
Good, Judy. I like that, Judy.
So you've got now. Here's another factor tonight. So we're talking about Biden has the age factor, right? I mean, it's with him.
Yes, yes.
For some people, it's going to be concerned. Then he has the VP factor, right? Because, and which is often tied in the age factor. There's a good chance, as you said, anybody can die anytime. But the older you are, the more chance you have. So probably it appears, at least at this point, that he'll make it to a first term, and won't need the help of the vice president to rise up. But now let's look at the Republican side. I can say with 100% certainty, Pence will not be Trump's choice for vice president.
Absolutely.
That's a no-brainer.
Right.
That's a no-brainer. No, you have to try this one on for size. What about Trump and Tucker Carlson?
Well, it's interesting because I was going to go into Tucker Carlson later in the show had you not appeared. That came up. That, I mean, a lot of people say, well, there'd be no way that could happen. But remember, even with Fox, they got rid of O'Reilly, and they say we don't really need these people. They got rid of Megyn Kelly, but Tucker Carlson, he could pop up as a candidate with Trump because he's made amends with Trump apparently. I mean, he was at that golf tournament
more so than Fox has. Now,
right,
Tucker Carlson will know more. Like, will he go with Newsmax or one of the other right-wing organizations? Will he start his own? Karen, certainly. Trump, I agree with you. Trump, from the day he came down those golden staircases in his fake supposedly nice hotel in New York, he and he's always starting again with making shit up. I mean, we know that. It's just it boggles my mind how anyone can support Donald Trump, but it does, and he's got a lot of them. If DeSantis can't turn the public view of him, and right now, if you believe the pundits, and we have to be Trucker John, I was hoping that, but legally, it has to be. Remember, it has to be a felony, and even then, there's a question. Even then, because there's nothing in the law that stops a person from running who's in prison. That we know because Eugene Debs did that. What is debatable is. They always thought that would be a moral issue, right? Who would elect a president that was indicted and found guilty of? So we'll be talking about this right up to November, whatever the date is, in 2024. But at least then, by that point, Brian, we'll have a better handle on what's going on. And I think I don't think there's any question. Tucker Carlson can never again reach the heights that he reached with Fox. Would you agree with that, Brian? No matter where he goes. He can't.
I don't know that
in news, where's he going to go? Is CNN going to hire him? MSNBC?
Well, certainly not those two.
But he's going to bring.
Right now, no. But
right. So what I'm saying is, if he has political ambitions, now's the time to put them in play.
Well, he could go like the Joe Rogan route and see if he can have an internet show on YouTube or whatever.
Now that's interesting. Joe Rogan, he had at one point he had the largest, most listened to podcast, right, in America, and he's an ass. I mean, we know that, but he still never had the power. Remember, TV is still more powerful than radio or podcast. It still is. YouTube and TV, because it brings in both listening and seeing and viewing and a personality. I think we spoke last week, Brian, a little bit about this idea of why TV stars are even more important, small I quotes around the word important, to people because they come into their living room and their bedroom. They share your living room and bedroom with you, right? I mean, they're in your house. Movies now are, but they're still not the same. They're still like something. Movies, most people think, well, that's a movie. I mean, it would take two big egos. I don't know if Trump would be interested because Tucker has criticized him from time to time. I don't know if Tucker would be interested, thinking that Trump would not lead him to win. But we'll know more. I mean, I think to me that is a definite possibility. And let's take it another way. Ron DeSantis. Let's take DeSantis as the second runner. What if he takes Tucker Carlson? Does that help him beat Trump? I mean, I don't know. We don't know.
Right.
You know, it's like
Well,
predicting.
there's really only three names, unless you start throwing in other, media
Right.
personalities like Hannity or whatever.
Right.
But I still think it's Trump, and quite frankly, I'm kind of surprised after January 6th. I thought, they should know this guy, but now they're all in on it. So
Well, because they want to win, and right now, today, right? Today, not tomorrow. Uh, Trump seems to be dominating both the news cycle and the polls of the Republican Party.
well, let me ask you this, because this is where it was going. I was calling this Code Red tonight. We're watching a Thomas Frieden clip.
Right.
It's not just Trump now, because it's the entire Republican Party. As I mentioned before you came on, we have the gerrymandering. We have what went on in Tennessee. We have what is happening in Montana. I don't even know how we even get to 2024, because it seems like they know that they cannot win a legit election. So now they're going to go complete autocracy fascism. And it might not even matter, because now it's not just Trump we're worried about. They're all in on this.
Well, if what you're saying is, and I've long favored it, I know there are arguments against it. First of all, we're not going to happen. We should get rid of the Electoral College at the president's level.
Right.
It should be
but
a popular.
you say yourself, it will not happen unless,
It will not,
especially
it
since
will
you
not,
have Gorsuch,
no,
Kavanaugh,
no,
and
no,
Alito.
it will not happen. It will not happen. So you do have to be concerned. Even though I live, Virginia is kind of a weird state, so I can't really say. New Jersey, let's use New Jersey. No, New Jersey doesn't have to worry about. It's going to be Democratic. It's going to vote Democratic. It's going to vote Democratic probably for the rest of its existence, just because of demographics. But it's not to be concerned, because New Jersey only has so many electoral votes, right? So it does have to be somewhat concerned about Idaho and Nevada and Montana, and these states that have 12 people in them. Because they do get a voice, and like I said, I don't
big
think
voice.
Well, if you look at percentages, don't hold me to this. I should have this figure. I think at one point I read where a vote of a person in Montana is worth 27 votes, from a person in California, because of the difference. By the time
minimum, right?
By the time you work it out, right? And I think a lot of people. I'm going to say this. I think a lot of people do not understand government, do not understand politics. It's difficult to understand. Okay, I mean, I spent time as a reporter and was fascinated with it and study it, and now live in Washington D.C. or right outside Washington D.C., where I can see it up close and personal. But democracy. We've been a republic. There's always been barriers to pure democracy, right? Always. And now we're seeing even more put up, Brian, as you said. The Republican Party realizes that they're outnumbered. You're right. The strength of the Republican Party is their rabid base tends to vote more than the Democratic base, but still nationwide. But then they start playing. Say they could get control of something in Pennsylvania, right? Or
state
Michigan,
legislatures,
or Wisconsin. The states that we need: Minnesota, Wisconsin. Because if you can win, given the nature, the real places that would decide it will be, in no particular order: Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Minnesota, and what else am I going to say? What's the other one in that area? So really, what you got interesting now is you really have the Midwest deciding the American election. You've got the coasts, right, that are going to be Democratic. You've got the South, which is basically going to be Republican. With some exceptions.
Perhaps Georgia, but we don't even know what will happen there, given.
Well, you have right now. We know that Georgia voted for 2 senators. They still have a Republican governor. They say, remember, it's the state of your favorite play toy, Marjorie Taylor Greene. So you have some things going on there. It's not. Then, of course, on top of all this is, what role in the 21st century does the president really play? I don't know, because we've got a gridlock everywhere else, right?
Well, if you're Trump, you just do it anyway.
I question that, but I'm sure there are a lot more things. I think there's a lot more things that Trump wanted to do that he couldn't do, right? I mean, again, my theory, and it's just mine. I'm not going to argue with any of it. That's done deal. Gary just put up Trump Carlson. Gary's predicted the last 117 American elections, so we're done. Right? But this idea, my thing with the president is really the most important thing the president does and can do is set the tone for the country. That's really what you should, what tone will this gentleman or this woman set? Because they can come in with all the promises, and if they don't have Congress behind them, they can't do it. They can come in with all kinds of executive orders, and if the Supreme Court overturns them, right? So the one thing they can do, though, is set a tone for the country. Now,
what do you think of this interesting comment with Judy here? Because you know how we say the same thing. How could people be Christian and support Trump? But what will happen to Christianity? In the United States, it'll be at war with itself.
I'm going to make a suggestion. If you really want to know what's going to happen with Christianity, and Judy, first of all, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's no question about that. In my thinking, a person who is a true Christian could not vote for Donald Trump. But if you go down to the Southern churches and listen to those preachers,
frightening.
Trump is their savior. And there is a school of thought, I don't know if I subscribe to it, that Trump is good because he's not really a Christian, so he won't fight the Christian fight. He'll fight for the Christian fight. Does that make any sense? In other words, he won't have to play by the Christian rules.
Right. Nor has he.
Voter fatigue comes in. I think, one of the things we all have to make certain as the time comes, I think we need to call 5 people that we don't really know real well and urge them to vote, first to vote, but hopefully to vote for the candidate that we have. So yeah, you've got the Biden age issue, and I'm not so sure that's the last time we'll see this. It's being played out a lot of places.
But why isn't the issue really fascism versus democracy issue? Isn't that what it really comes down to?
Of course. Do you know why it isn't? Because we're a cult of personality. That's why. Fascism is an idea. Democracy is an idea, right? Joe Biden is a real person. Donald Trump is a real person. They're on TV. I think that's where people, it's the only thing that can explain it. To me, I mean, it makes no sense other than that. Bill Gates of Microsoft is funding a nuke plant in Wyoming. Everybody in Wyoming hated him prior to this, but now they want a job at his nuke plant. Well, laughingly, everybody's an environmentalist till it messes with them, or they can get a profit out of it.
Well, here is the point. We need to take the House and we need to take the Senate. But I don't, I do understand that you have a better chance of winning the Senate than any individual congressional election. It's
Seats.
So, but the problem is the House. That's what bothers me the most.
Well, because the House.
No, it doesn't. The Senate bothers me too. I mean, look, South Dakota, North Dakota, Wyoming, Utah, all that crap. That bothers me.
But I think you're right, Brian, because the thing is, a senator has to win the entire state, right? I mean, they do.
Mm-hmm.
A congressperson only has to win the district they're representing, right? Could Jeff Van Drew win a spot in New Jersey if it was a statewide election? And that's your congressman. And the answer is no.
Right? No.
Not even close, right? But he then assumes, and has it for the foreseeable future, will be the congressman representing you. And so that's where it gets so tough in the House. You're right, Brian.
And that's what you see. They have these super majorities, and again, it's not just for Congress, but these state legislatures. That's the problem too.
Well, I want one of the things I might talk about in a few minutes.
And then people are just going to move, and then you're really going to have a divided America.
Well, divided we stand. Okay.
Are people moving into Florida who are fascist, or autocrats?
I think people are moving out of Florida who aren't.
Right.
In other words, how could you be, given their laws, how could you be the mother or father of a homosexual child and plan to raise that child in Florida? You have to think.
Right. So where do you go? Where do you go? Besides out. I mean, I know you go. You go to Georgia, the neighboring state, or
no. You can get out of this damn South altogether. Okay. Now, that's easier said than done, right? People, despite their complaints, they have strong ties to their areas. You're either a person. I guess I'm not going to explain. You're either a person when you're raised in a community. You're either a person who's going to stay there, and community meaning state, or your local town, or you're going to get out. And so, I mean, it's easy to say they're going to move. I don't know. Now, again, in general, if it still applies, the older you get, the more conservative you get. That's always been the adage, right? And it's been pretty much proven true in my lifetime, at least for the people I know. And who moves to Florida? Older people, right? You already have a large Cuban population. They are Republican. Now, from what I hear, I'm not there, but I hear that a lot of those coming from Honduras and El Salvador and places like that, Guatemala, because they have problems with leftist regimes there, the Republicans have been very effective in, saying the Democrats are the same as the socialists in your country. So the other thing was, well, when the Hispanics rise, Democrats will be in. Now, I saw something interesting. I don't know whose comment it was about if the idea of Biden running at a different time. Ideally, maybe in retrospect, if Biden had been the candidate before Hillary, right, and Biden won, and then Hillary comes along, but it didn't work that way. It didn't work that way. So that's just in
well, again, though, Hillary actually, think about it, Hillary did win, but she didn't win.
Oh, come on. I know that argument until we abolish the Electoral College, that argument is moot.
Right. But what I'm saying is that this is the code red. This is the problem that as Trucker John or whoever posted this, we're getting to the point where it's just going to be minority. And this is, look, you had 2000 was the problem. Then you had it back again in 2016. This thing is nonstop. And you're right, but we're not getting rid of the Electoral College. So what we have is minority rule, at least in now in certain states like North Carolina. Well, close to North Carolina. It's
depending on where you are and you do I find the fact of what's going on, Montana with the transgendered person there in terms of politics. How the hell do you get away with that? Well, you get away with it, Brian, because you have enough votes, right? Now you can't censor Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert or for the remarks they've made, but out there, if you're a transgender Democrat, you can be censored, or censored and censured, both. So, it's a good thing we're not based on optimism this show, because if we were, we'd be shit out of luck. From places, yes, Karen, that's my understanding of that's what I was saying before. I think you're onto something. Now, what happens is, will enough people move out of Florida to change that? Or will that simply mean the conservative right gets even more power in Florida because those who probably would be left, or Democrats will move out, and we don't know that either. And I think some things are just sham. Like I sit back and laugh about the Disney DeSantis battle. They both win that one. Come on. DeSantis knew, he's not stupid. He knew full well that attacking Disney would just give him brownie points as the guy who wasn't afraid to take on Mickey Mouse. And he got those points. But Disney, in turn, knows it's not going anywhere, so it sues it. Attendance is not down at Disney. I would bet you attendance is up. Again, for this factor, Disney's back in the news. So some family somewhere, hon, we went to go to Disney last year. We better go this year, kind of thing. So, and the other thing that I think I was reading a little bit about, it's going to be interesting. You need money to win, and you need more money than ever to win politics, and you need more money than ever to win the presidential race. Right now, it appears that a lot of the major Republican fundraisers who aren't elected officials are holding back, right? They're waiting to see
what happens.
So if a tremendous influx of that went with Trump, that boosts Trump. If a tremendous influx of that went with DeSantis, I don't see Nikki Haley. I don't see any of the other candidates right now as viable, but who knows? I mean, it looks already like Josh Hawley thought at one point he would be a candidate, right? He's already on Trump's. He's not going to run. Not going to run against him. So
So what happens if Trump loses? Where does the Republican Party go? I mean, you think that they would say, "Oh, this really isn't working out," but then again, they may go all the way.
why wouldn't they go all the way, Brian?
Well, that's what I'm saying. It seems like they're going all the way with
Look,
cheating, doing whatever they have to
If-
do for having minority rule.
every time I watch a clip from January 6th, and I try to avoid them because I don't really need to see them anymore. And I think there are people that believe that was okay. There were people that believe, as the one congressman said, "Oh, that was just the way tourists act." That tells you a lot about how far they will go.
Right.
Not just will they go and do that, but how will they feel after? And Trump has basically planted the seed very deeply. If I lose, it's fixed.
Right.
Now, that's what he says. If I, basically. So how many people, support that? How many people say they would? And then we've got our friends that we haven't talked about in the Supreme Court. Your favorite justice. I know how much you admire Clarence Thomas, so I'm sorry to attack him. I mean, anybody else in any public office in America would have been charged and out of office taking the money he took from already.
Right.
And now, there's been a long-standing history of that. Antonia Scalia, Dick Cheney used to take Scalia hunting and pick up the tab when Enron was coming. I mean, when his own businesses were coming before that. Gorsuch has a problem now because he has a gentleman by the name of Brian Duffy. He's the head of a law firm that frequently his law firm appears. In fact, they've appeared. Let me get the number here. I had it right here. Okay. They've appeared. His law firm has appeared before the Supreme Court 12 times, and 8 of them, Gorsuch has been a vote for him. It's just up there. I missed it. Put the last comment up again, Brian. How do we abolish?
Yeah.
Judy, the answer is you don't. I mean, I think it's one of the best things you have to do. It would really take everybody to be in agreement, right? And what I mean by that, the president, the House, the Senate, you'd have a constitutional convention because it is mentioned in the Constitution. So it's just overwhelming. And I don't see, it's one of those easy solutions that we'll just never get to. It's like saying, how do we deal with guns? At least guns to a certain extent. The difference between the electoral college is a federal nationwide issue, right? Guns are a state by state issue. But back to the Supreme Court. So what do you do if you feel badly? Now with the Supreme Court, they have some organizations now that are coming out and grassroots who are trying to petition the Supreme Court to change. Before we make heroes out of the liberals, do you know all 9 justices have come out since the Thomas?
I did see that. I did see that. Yes.
That we're all leave us alone. We're fine policing ourselves. Bullshit. Okay, and that's 3 liberals saying that too. Okay. So again, there's like a camaraderie. The 2 best friends on the court in my lifetime have been Scalia and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and you can find 2 more different people. But a camaraderie came on the court that was able to overcome their political beliefs, right? There's been talk, Anthony, but I don't think so. I think Disney is going to be in Florida for a couple reasons. One is just the investment. I mean, they'd really have to attack it in some way that they haven't done yet. The second thing is the weather is better in Florida than it is in South Carolina. That's that's just a big thing. Now that could it happen? Of course, but would it happen? I mean, they're not going to move to New York. The weather's too bad. They're not going to move to the Midwest. Yeah, requires same as amendment to the Constitution. You're right. So, and that's what I said. So, in order to get to that point, right, you either have to have massive numbers of people, but state legislators, everybody could undermine it at every level because they could kind of stop the vote. Yeah, and Trump spent all that $250 million too, and not necessarily on running his campaign. I mean, come on, give the guy his due. he should be in the grifter con man Hall of Fame. Maybe even move over P.T. Barnum. Donald Trump is here. Okay, let's look at Sully here. Supposedly charges might come for Trump committing mail and wire fraud, telling his supporters that it was election fraud, and asking for dollars. Yes. 2 questions. Does that keep people from voting for him? And 2, would a conviction keep him from running for president? And that's what's being, that's, no, I'm going to do that. I like that. Because I'm emphasizing my point. It's a woodpecker.
Okay.
What happens is you get, I don't want to say that Trump's extraordinary, but I will. Trump, the rules, you've said it, Brian, kind of Teflon, the rules don't seem to apply to Trump. And I think there's some truth to that. So far, we know he's a polarizing figure, right? I know how I feel about him. I know how you feel about him. I know how many people feel about him. But I also know how people that support him feel about him. And I think what people have to remember is, it's not going to stop. People say, well, if Trump comes back, it's going to be a case of a presidency of revenge. And that's true. But if you're against the people that Trump's against, you're all for that. Right, Judy, there you are. I mean, and this is an interesting thing I thought about. The larger the church, the more problems there seem to be about a dominant figure, right? First of all, they have more power, right? More votes in a mega church. And I know, with my grandchildren being in Atlanta, I spend some time down there now, and there's some big damn churches in and about Tuscaloosa. I mean, large churches. And you're right. See, Trucker, I mean, that's where we are now. I mean, when USA was better, and it was, guns ruined it. It's not just the people who get killed by guns, families are devastated. And you know what, Mr. Wonka, if I had to pick an issue that I would like to work on and have worked on for a long time, it's been trying to do something with guns. But I've given up. When I say I've given up, I mean, I'll still do the things, but I don't see what I do as meaningful. I really don't. It's just not going to change because it morphs into something else, right? It morphs into cheerleaders getting into a car, a guy showing up on the wrong porch. And then it morphs into school shootings. And then it morphs into, these little kids. Well, hell, we've had 3 major shootings, of little kids. Nothing changes it. People want their freaking guns. And that is nothing we're going to do. Nothing we're going to do is going to change that. Once in a while, the Kentucky shooting, one of the friends of the governor was shot. And he apparently is talking about putting something in place. Well, I couldn't argue with there either. I mean, I think I kind of laid it out. I mean,
and he deserves that legacy. He absolutely deserves it.
Well, he thought. Well, I don't know. Remember when it was a 5-4 court, I said Roberts would be the key vote, right? And he was. But now it's a 6-3 vote. Doesn't matter what he does. They've got their 5 conservative votes. It does not matter. And what I find interesting is people say, well, that's the law. No, 5 men or women voted for something and 4 voted against it. Yes, it is the law, but that doesn't mean it's right. You know what I mean? So it just means, and anybody's naive that thinks that politics is not an integral part of the Supreme Court. Of course it is. I'm headed down there in July, so I'll let you know, friends, what I find out. I do know that I've heard from people who are surprised down there in Florida, especially up North Florida, not so much down the beach area, where you find still a lot of pro-Trump and fuck Biden signs. Big. I mean, right. Barns and stuff. And I don't get. I mean, I do get, but what has Joe Biden done that's so bad? If anything, I've fallen for not doing enough stuff I want him to, right? But I haven't seen.
Well, there goes back to the point. The hatred on that side, is so fierce. I mean, I don't like them at all, and neither do you. But my God, they're so hateful they, they could throw us into the sea. We might as well be Iran or something. That's what they feel about us.
Well, of course they do, because we represent the America that they don't think should be.
I'm telling you, as soon as Obama won, that's when. I mean, I know in '93 they weren't willing to negotiate with the contract with America, but when Obama became president, that was their ugliest day, and it just
Well,
showed you the bigotry and hatred they had.
and that was one of the times in my life where his election, but even more so his re-election, I thought we were further along than we were. And what we were doing, Brian, is just what you said. It was really making the country, I mean, not Barack Obama personally, but certainly it made it more divisive having a black president.
And
And
they said, like, is he screwed the country? What did he do wrong? He didn't do anything wrong.
he was black.
If anything,
Well,
he
you
was
gotta
too
be.
nice to Republicans. That was his, what I think, my biggest complaint, that he blew it with the Supreme Court, and he blew it trying to be nice to them. But he was a gentleman to them.
Now, we were talking tonight, interesting enough, I was talking to someone in D.C., and we're talking about this very thing we're talking about, Biden, electability, right? And he said, I can get you a Democratic president. And he said, I can give you two names. Want to guess who those two names were?
Who's this? Ralph said this?
No, somebody involved in politics down here. I was talking to him and said, well, what do you, who? He said, I can give you two. And he gave me two
I'll
names.
probably say
Want to
Joe
guess?
Manchin. No?
No, he's being serious. President of the United States.
Well, I'm not going to guess on Gavin Newsom, but I would guess Governor Whitmer from Michigan.
Nope. You want me to tell you?
Why not?
Oprah Winfrey, Michelle Obama. Think about that. Guy
I
has
don't
a
know that
point.
Michelle Obama would want to be president at this point.
Oh no, that's not the point, Brian. The point is both of them, I think, would be electable. I agree. If you subscribe to my cult of personality kind of thing, they're in the news. They're known. Michelle, despite the fact of ignorant redneck whatever's attacking her, she's there was a running joke down here that we elected the wrong Obama. And she won't run. Oprah won't run either. Now, and the last, I want to pay my last respects to somebody that I think changed American politics and America forever, and he died this week, and that's the one and only Jerry Springer.
Yeah. Well,
If you look at a moment, go back, Brian, and look at the growth of his show, which predates Fox, which predates the internet. That really, he was putting together a show that is the base of the Republican Party now, and of course he was a politician twice. He was elected mayor of Cincinnati and was a council person in Cincinnati during his time. So he certainly was politically astute. But what he was able to do was to show this side of America. Paved the way for reality TV, right? Reality TV paved the way for the Trump White House. So Jerry Springer, I think 100 years from now, as people are dissecting America and figuring out what the hell happened, I think he'll be a name that comes up. I really do. Not saying I like him, not saying I respect him. I'm just saying that Jerry Springer show kind of
he kind of figured it all out. He figured it out.
He did. He did.
He figured that Americans were basically like voyeurs, and they like watching that kind of crap.
Right, and that's what and
there you got the Maury Poviches of the world too with it.
And Maury came over. I mean, but Jerry was. It's like of shock radio. There's Howard Stern, right? I mean, he really is. Howard is one of a kind. I think sometimes he's very, very good. And I think sometimes he's a pompous, arrogant asshole. But he had, we'll give him that. And I think Jerry Springer, we're going to give the TV version of that. And what's interesting, Howard probably does cost more politics than anybody. He has some real right-wing listeners, and because they like his sexual part, that kind of part.
Right.
But he also has a lot of liberals. Springer also the same way. There was not really a political bent to his show, right? but it paved the way for these shows that are out there. And it'll be interesting too. Something else I read, and I don't know if this is true. Maybe next week we'll talk about it, see what other people who listen to the show feel. They feel that another thing that's happened is endorsements are a lot less powerful than they used to be. I'm talking about newspaper endorsements, non-political endorsements, right? That they really don't have the impact because people have pretty much made up their mind, sometimes by birth. I'm a Republican, I'm going to vote Republican.
Right.
So I don't know. Through it all, though, as Brian, we were talking a little bit earlier this week, and we still would be hard pressed as we sit here tonight at 11 o'clock, however many of us there are listening to this, or how many people listen to it later, to say that America, when you compare it to the rest of the world, we're still in a pretty damn good position, but not as good as we should be.
Right.
And certainly on a downhill slide, not an uphill climb. That's how I view America right now.
Right.
And I can't really say, because I didn't live 100 years ago, certainly the Civil War divided America. Certainly the robber barons, there's never really been this, I said it 1,000 times, but I say it again, make America great again. When was America truly great? It never was. It was just better than the others, right? And there you are. And that would be an interesting question. And maybe somebody out there is researching, I don't mean our audience. Are ethics and morals less important today than they were 100 years ago in America? I don't have an answer for it. I would tend to believe that they are, simply because capitalism does not really lead to morality and ethical behavior. It just doesn't. It's American individualism doesn't lend to that. And there are to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, make a lot of money, and be an individual. There you are, Chuck. And as Democrats, unfortunately, at 94, Harry Belafonte decided, he didn't decide, he checked out. What Harry Belafonte, a lot of people don't realize that, he was huge in the civil rights movement.
Right, he certainly was.
Huge, both in support. He was the one who worked behind the scenes to get all the actors to come out, Marlon Brando and the white actors who came out, Paul Newman, Morton Downey Jr., there's a name from the past. But again, I'm certainly not going to argue with somebody, but Morton Downey Jr. did not have the impact, numbers-wise, of Springer. That's I think Downey was more in that confrontational himself. So I'll give Downey that. He was probably the first newsman, the anti-Walter Cronkite, right? Civil rights are better than 100 years ago. I believe that. I'm not black, so I'll defer, or I'm not Native American, I'm white, and a majority. But what my question then becomes, but is it good enough? And the answer is no. Hey, Kim. The answer is just simply no. Now, what do we do to make it better? That, my friends, is the big question. But I think part of it, we talk about it. I would hope that everyone on this show will vote. I really don't care how you vote. But I think that may be the group that irks me even more, is people who can just sit it out. I don't quite get that. I get the passion on the one side. I get our side, which I believe is closer to the truth than their side. But I don't get how people. I don't get how people sit it out. Brian, you're yawning again. Are we keeping you up? Did you not get your nap this afternoon?
I'm just tired. That's all. Just tired.
Well, I pick on Brian, but Brian works a full week, and then does his show. I don't work any day, and then I do this show. So obviously, I'm more refreshed than Brian, simply because I don't have to go to work Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday or Friday or Saturday or Sunday.
So
again, I want to thank people just for myself. I'm glad to do a show where we don't have to go into my health. I will say this for anybody who's interested. The last show that I did prior to last week was actually Memorial Day weekend a year ago. That was the very last show I did. I feel better today than I did that night. A whole hell of a lot better. And the recuperation going well. And so, I'm not going to dwell on that. But again, I just want to thank people who are concerned. And in this case, I will accept prayers. I will accept thoughts, good feelings, and money. I'm always good about people sending me money to be grateful, to be healthy again. So that's it for me tonight, Ryan.
Well, Dave, I certainly, we are happy that you're doing better. We missed you.
Brian, let's not lie. If you were happy I'm doing better, you would pay me to do this show.
Well, we are. Remember, as I said, the fact that we are not monetized, we don't ask for money, but if you remember, the mantra is we don't give money either. So it's an equal transaction. So you borrow nor lend. So no, but who knows, Dave? Maybe 100 years from now, this show will go into
No, it won't.
Ever, and
no,
your family will reap the benefits of it.
No, they won't. What would be interesting? You do bring up an interesting point. Okay. This show, and any show, anything that's on YouTube, right? Anything that's on YouTube has the ability to last as long as the physical, thing lasts. Like we're seeing with VHS tapes, they get corrupted. So it will be interesting what people would think was important. Right now, right now TikTok is winning the battle, with YouTube second, I think, and Facebook now a way distant third, and Twitter falling off the board pretty quickly. But all that's subject to change. So will people view this show 100 years from now? I don't know. Good night, everyone.
All right, Dave.
Before Brian passes out.
Yeah, but I'll get there. So anyway, thank you, everybody. And remember, again, if you're new to Divided We Stand, please consider subscribing to the YouTube channel. And if you make your way over to Facebook, please request to become a member of Divided We Stand. We would appreciate it. We don't ask for anything but your ears and your commentary. So,
and by that, he does not mean cut off your ears and send it to Brian.
Right.
He means keep them on your head.
So we'll see everybody next week. I know there are a few we haven't seen. I guess some people are busy watching the hockey games or something like that. I don't know. But we will be back next week. Knock wood. And Dave, you'd be good at knocking wood because I know your pen was on knocking there.
It's interesting. You mean when I was doing that? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, and you were on beat too, like. And I say what?
It's funny. I would say I don't have nervous habits, but a pen in my hand is dangerous. I had to take the click pen out because I was always doing the click like this,
I remember that.
Now I'm starting to actually beat, so I might just throw the pen away.
You got to get yourself a notepad or something like that, so I won't hear it as much. So anyway, Dave, I am going to sign off completely.
Gotcha.
So I'll call you tomorrow. And,
sounds good.
And one thing that Joey mentioned, pen. Joey was a pen thief in high school. So, Dave, keep your pen in your pocket because Mr. Fulcher might steal your pen.
Could happen.
Okay. All right, Dave. And good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.